Today I will be talking about how to internationalize the software that we develop. The software that we develop is usually used by the users, the human beings, and sometimes those users are within a geographic location, but most of the time they can be anywhere around the globe. So when we develop such kind of software that can be used anywhere on the globe, we have to consider a lot of things, especially the languages, the cultures, the other regional settings, and those things have to be considered well before we start developing the software. We have to design certain things according to those requirements. We need to make sure that if our software is running in France, under their language and culture, it works perfectly. If it is running somewhere in the Gulf or Middle East, it works perfectly. There are no issues with that. And how to develop a software that runs anywhere on the globe, and all this thing is related to internationalization, and that deals with globalization. There is a concept of globalization, then there is a concept of localization and translation. So I will just go quickly what do they mean. Um, Globalization is a kind of assurance to make sure that the software can be installed and run anywhere on the globe. Somebody has an operating system that is Chinese, somebody has an operating system, Windows operating system, or any other operating system somewhere in the Middle East running maybe in Arabic language. So, our software that we develop, if somebody installs it in China, uh, in Chinese or in Japanese, the software should not crash. It should make sure that all the tasks that the software need to do, it performs without any error, without any crashes. So that means it respects all the geographical regions, cultures, and language barriers. When we show data into our software and forms, we have different kind of data, and the date, time, the currency. So every culture, every area has a different kind of formatting these kind of things. Somewhere we mentioned distance in kilometers, somewhere in miles, somewhere the currency formatting is done based on the dots, and in some countries it is based on the comma. So we distinguish thousands with the comma, and in Germany it is with the dot. So if our software runs somewhere in England, it should separate the currency formation based on the comma, and if it is running in Germany, it should use the dot. Similarly, when we format the date, the date, day, month, and a year separation is done based on the slash here in UK. But if we're running the same software in Germany or in any other countries, we might expect a dot to separate these different parts of the date. So all these formation related issues or encoding related issues, that if our software is saving some data or reading some files, it is able to read both in Chinese operating system or both on German or any other. So, or if it needs to know and be able to read any kind of data based on the encoding that is needed on that environment. So all these things are dealt by the globalization. Now, localization deals with the ability of rendering the contents according to that culture. So if we are having a user interface in our software, and that user interface is representing some information to the user, so all the areas that we need to take care of formatting that I mentioned earlier, like how the date will be represented, how the telephone number, contact information, measurement, colors, shapes, beliefs, and anything that we need to take care of based on that culture, the the culture of the user who is using our software. If we respect that and the software take care of all of these things, that means our software is fully localized. So the user expects date to be displayed in a certain format, and our software does that. User expect the telephone or something else to be displayed in a certain format, and our software does that. User expects the distance to be mentioned in miles, our software does that. Somewhere else user expects in kilometers, so our software displays in kilometers. Similarly, if we can want to go to further extent, we can even choose the colors, shapes and size or styles that are popular within those area. That is called localization. Now, translation is specifically translating all those messages, those labels, the titles, and anything that is there on the UI in the language of the user. So it's a process of translating UI resources to the local language of the user. Our software interacts with the user based on the UI, and on UI we have menus, labels, buttons, tooltips. We show some messages to the user. So everything should be displayed in Chinese if the software is being used by somebody in China. If the same software is being used by somebody in Germany, everything should be displayed in their language. If it is in any other part of the globe, the software should be able to run in that culture and should be able to display all these things, menus, labels, and text in their language. When to translate, that's another thing. How does the software know that I should start displaying my messages, menus, and resources in Chinese or Japanese or some other languages? There are ways. One way is that the software does all this detection automatically. For example, when software starts up, it gets the information from the operating system and say, oh, I'm running in this language, in this region, or in this culture settings, and it automatically initializes everything based on that culture. Um, the other way is that we give user an option that okay, which we have our software supports these different number of languages, which one you prefer to see. So in that case we can show a combo box or some control. User can um, go to that control and select the desired language that he or she wants to operate the software in. That's another option. There are pros and cons of both of approaches, but the second approach where we give user the option to go and select is more flexible, more easy to test even as well, and there is a possibility that user can switch at any time. So it doesn't like at start. If user want to see something in English, he can see in English. If he's not happy, he want to go and see the things in Spanish, he can go and change the language of the software at any time. And also it is also possible that in some place in production or in common place where a software is being used by shifts, so in the first shift somebody prefers in Chinese, and the second shift somebody prefers in maybe Arabic, so both of the users should be able to use the same software in different language. That's why the second option is more flexible. Now how do we globalize a software? When we talk about globalization, we prefer culture independent methods, so that when we develop software, we have built in methods by .NET framework or similarly other frameworks as well. And those methods or those APIs are used to perform the formatting. We can format the date, we can format string, currency, numbers, lot of things. There are built-in methods to do that. One way is if we want to ensure or implement the globalization, means if we want to ensure that our software should be able to run in any culture or any part of the world, we should prefer to use the methods which are culture independent. For example, if we say to string or something like to upper or to lower, then there the APIs have provided to upper with invariant culture. So there is another overloaded method which is the copy of the same method but to be used by the invariant culture. That means that invariant culture method will work independent of which culture it is running, and it will use the standard way everywhere. We should prefer to use that. If there is a specific requirement to use the culture sensitive method, then we use the overloaded method and provide that culture name so that the method or operation, that formation, that equality or comparison operation is done according to the given culture. So we need to take care of these things when we are developing the software, when we are designing the software, so that all the globalization aspects are considered and they are met. When we are developing, we also need to make sure that what is the impact of encoding that we are using within our software, because we are most of the time reading files, saving data from different parts, and we need to take care of which encoding will save and which encoding will read the data. That is another aspect we need to understand. That when it comes to localization and translation, again, there are two ways to do that. One is the built-in or standard method provided by the .NET, and that is to have all our resources in resource files, and we read everything from resources, whatever is being needed to display on the forms or in the messages. We build the software, we deploy it, and once the translation is needed, what we do, we translate the messages in the resource files, build the satellite assemblies, and deploy the satellite assemblies. And this can be done after the deployment, independent of the initial deployment. And when the software runs, it detects if I am running in this locale and I have a satellite assembly to serve this locale, then it will go and load the resources from that particular resource file which is meant to serve for that locale. So if software is running in Japanese, it will try to find a satellite assembly with the Japanese locale ID, and it will try to load all the resources from that. So everything is translated in Japanese. The other is the custom way, which is that don't go the standard way. Implement some other repository or a service which holds all the resources and the translations for the specific locale IDs. That is more flexible. We can build that according to our requirement, and we can use it according to our requirement. And it is totally independent of the development procedure. Um, all we need to take care is when we are developing, we know that our software can interact with some external service or can external repository, and based on the language selection, it has the ability to contact that repository or service, get all its resources, and set all those messages or resources, their text titles and everything from that repository. So as long as that bonding is done, that integration is done, the messages can be translated by anybody at any time in the external service or in the external repository. So that's the way I will be talking more today. Now, how to do it? To go through this whole process, I will take a small sample application that has some menus, buttons, labels, some controls that shows currency and date time, and a user control, custom control that shows some data in the grid, and the grid has a couple of columns as well. So we will try to translate this sample application today. So how we'll do it? We will provide a combo box where user will see all the languages that this sample application supports and can be translated to. User at any time can select any of the language, and upon the selection, the application should respond and change all of its layout, formats, and messages based on the language selection. And it It will do one more task. The current selection will also be saved. So if the application is closed and rerun next time, it will remember what was the last selected locale ID, and then it will load by default based on the last selected locale ID. To do that, if we are developing a new application, no problem. But if we are going to translate an existing application, then we need to do few things. For example, we need to detect all the UI elements that are used to interact with the user. We usually have in any application menu items, labels, buttons, and buttons have their titles. There are lists and grids, and they have their columns, and the column headers are usually seen by the users. We show some messages to the user. We also log errors and information. So all these things the application is doing. We can either translate all of them, or we can choose or opt to translate some of these things. And then we have some culture sensitive data like date, time, and currency is the most common. And if we're displaying these things, these information, we need to handle that as well. For culture sensitive data, we don't need to do much. We just need to inform our framework or APIs that I'm running in this culture. So please do all the formation comparisons and all this kind of stuff based on my current culture. And that, if we have to format the date, time, and currency, what we do, we set the culture info. So we get our current thread, and current thread has a property called current culture and current UI culture. So we can set both of these properties based on our current culture. Current culture is kind of server side and backend operation. So if we get our current thread and set the current culture based on, say, English locale, all the formation will be English. So if we say ENGB is our locale and we set the current culture based on that, that means our date time by default will be formatted according to UK. If we set that to DE-DE, that means everything related to currency and date time will be formatted according to Germany. Similarly, current UI culture. Why we have two cultures? One is kind of backend operation like server side, and the other is that UI. So we have software where the server side runs separate, the user side runs separate. So current culture is backend server side, current UI culture is the UI side. If somebody want to read more, there is a link down. You can go and read that. Let's now go to the sample application and see what we have in here. So I have this application. Let me run it. So this is the application. So I just made it for this video. So this application has this menu, few things they don't do. It's just a sample to show you. Then I have this applications. This is a user control that has this data grid in it, and it has some buttons like new will add more records, delete will try to delete a record, and save will save it. And then we have this order data section here. We are showing order date and some currency amount in here. And there is a combo box. So this list is kind of hard coded, and the user can select any of these languages and can change at any time. At the moment it doesn't do anything, but what we will be doing is implementing this functionality today, that if users select this Chinese from here, everything like this file menu, help, these button and their labels, these columns of the grid, this label, and this order date, order data, everything should change their titles according to whatever has been given in the translation repository. For example, order date will be translated to whatever is the equivalent in Chinese, total amount will be shown in Chinese. And also this data, this date formation, at the moment it is showing according to the United Kingdom ENGB culture. If it is selected like German is selected here, it will show differently. Same the currency, it's a 4,327. So there is a comma between 1,000 and rest of the amount. And in some countries it is comma, in some countries it is dot. So it will change accordingly according to the selection. So let's start. So let's start by first thing, which is that our application will remember the selection of what locale was selected by the user. So for that, I will define a new user setting, and default value is ENGB, that if nothing is selected by default, it will load everything in English, and English is the GDG, Great Britain. Uh, So let's save that. And after the setting, we go to the main form and we go for where the selection changes. So for that, so these languages that are shown in the combo are hard coded here in this property. So what I will do, I can write here var selected language, and I can say language dot where x dot, so language has a name dot equals to whatever is selected in that combo locales dot text, and I will use the second parameter invariant culture ignore case. So this is what I was talking, that whenever it comes to equality, comparison or formation, we one option is that we straight away use this invariant culture specific options, so that we are sure that our applications will run in all these different cultures. So if I get my language, so I will say first or default. So now I have got the language which is selected in that combo, and as we have defined the properties dot settings dot default user locale ID. So what we can do, selected language dot locale ID. So we got the language which was selected in the combo box, we set it to the user property, and then we say properties dot settings dot default dot save. So now this property or this setting is saved in the user settings for future. And after that, once we save it, what we can say, we can say load data. Load data is the method that will show the data. So in what we are doing, or in the load data, we're just showing the current date and time in this text field which we saw earlier, and this value as currency into another field. Then this is something else I will explain you later. And then we have a child control in here. This one, this is child control, and this child control we can see here. So this one has a grid, data grid, and shows some hard coded stuff in here. So it shows a list of these applications, and it has got two columns, and it shows the data in here. So we ask this user control to show its data. Now when the language is changed, we have saved it into settings, and we have invoked the load data method. And in load data, what we can do, so we go to load data, and in load data, we can call a method called update translation. So this method will be responsible for updating everything based on the current translation. So we can make a new method, and in that new method, the first thing we do is, as I said, for we set our current culture and current UI culture. So for that, we can say thread dot current thread dot current culture new system dot globalization dot culture info. and in here what we need is the current locale. And what we can do, current locale, we know it, we have just set it into properties dot settings dot default dot user. Okay. So this is our current locale. Okay, so we set both of these cultures, and just by doing this we can see that our formatting, currency formatting and other stuff is happening now. So if I select English, we can see that this is now displayed according to the Great Britain, and if I go and select German, see this whole thing is changed. So date parts are now separated by dot, and similarly the currency, the thousand part was it was comma here now, and it is dot here. And if I go other languages, we can see everything is changing according to the language or the culture that we have set. So this is the first part, that anything related to the formation of these data is done by setting the culture info to our thread. Next is how to translate all these resources, their labels and related text. Okay, so for that, what we need to do, we can continue here doing more stuff. So what we need to do here is to do we can say initialize a new class that is responsible of providing all translations. So we'll make up a class, we'll initialize it here. For example, we can say let's name the translations dot init, and we can say this class will initialize itself here, and it will be responsible to provide us all the resources, and say this class can manage resources for more than one application. So what we can do, we can initialize this class based on so first parameter we can say takes the application name. So let's say our application name is just a sample app, and second parameter we can give the current locale, so that this class will initialize itself for this application and for this locale which is selected. And then after that we can now ask this class to give us all the translations for the given resources. Now how many resources we got? For that, what we do, we go to the resource file over here, and we can see all the resources that we have here. For example, this is the menu. Its text is save, file, then save, then exit, then help, then about. So what I can do, I can pick if the application is already there, and I have. So first, as a first step, I will start bringing all these kind of resources into one place where I need to um, load them from the external service. So let me get all of them. So I have all of them here. So these are all the resources on this UI or in this form that I want to translate. And what I will do now, I have initialized this class, so I can ask this class, hey class, give me the resource translation or resource text for this one. Now you can come up with your own naming convention, and for me I can say sample app underscore main form underscore menu item and underscore file. So I just need to give a unique name to this resource so that I know when the external service or repository or database is managing this resource, it will maybe use this name as unique name for this resource. So I can ask this class that give me this resource. So if I can make a property over there, and if I say let's make this class translations, we can this folder is empty, I just made for this. We can go and make a file here. Okay, so we have this class, we can make it public if we need to. And okay, so now let's say we need an init method in there. We go. So this method is static. We make the variables static as well. Okay, so initialize is done. Next, I can make a property, and when I make a property, I have a getter and setter. I don't need a setter for this one. All I'm interested in the getter of this property, and in the getter, I can simply return file. So now this property, whenever I need the translation for this resource, I can go and can ask this class. So this class will be responsible to give me the current translation of this resource for this locale and for this application. So similarly, I can go and make all the properties for all the resources, and so we can go and make the properties for all of them. So once I have all the properties and they provide me the default text, whatever is in English, and we don't need this anymore here, we can remove it. Okay, so now I have this class which I initialize, and every time I need any translation, I go to this class, and every property of this class at the moment giving me just the default text, which is English. So I haven't yet implemented the logic that how this class will get the translation. I need to link here some service or some repository where it will go and fetch the translation for this resource against this selected locale. That will do later, but first let's run the application and see everything is okay. So now we have this, so we can see when we change the selection, all these resources and their text is obtained from the class, but because uh, for every locale selection it just returns the hard-coded stuff, so we don't observe this change. So our next point is to continue, and in fact let's first integrate this one with the backend stuff. So I already have some of the DLLs or components which are linked to the backend service, and backend service, which is the foundation service, is responsible for providing me the translation. So everything is done. All I need to do is add the reference and use this service. So this is the client side of that service. So I link to that. And in here, what I need to do, I will say this framework provides me a no, it's translation base, yes, translation base dot get translation for resource, I think, yes. And here I can give the property name. So I can give the property name, which is like I need a resource, I need a translation for this resource, and for this app name, which is sorry, first one is the default message. So default message, we can keep this one. Default message is if um, the backend doesn't find any translation for this resource, we will use this one. So that means that our system will not fail at any time. If it is able to get the translation, it will use it. Otherwise, we have a default message that will be used anyway if nothing comes from the service or the backend. And next is the app name. So we say for this app, for this local ID, give us local ID. Okay, instead of current local, let's simply say local ID. Right. But I have a problem. When I will write this property for this one, I need to say save here, and I need to change this one here. So I have another way to deal with this. I can write method base, no, me. I can use a reflection, and what is the method? Get current method and dot name. So this will by default give me this name. So I don't need to write this name for every property. So now I can write everything same, and the only thing will change is the default message. So yeah, let me complete all this. So now I have completed all the properties, and now the integration of this class with the backend system, the foundation service, which will provide the translation for all these resources that we need. The integration is done, and we can test it now. So if I select a different language, we can see some of the stuff is translated. And okay, so we see some of the stuff is translated because I already have these messages added at the backend in the service. But initially, we will not have anything in the backend system. So I will explain you how will we add these translation and messages in the backend service as well. In fact, let me clear that out so that we go exactly the natural way. So I clean up everything from backend, and now I ask for the translation from the backend service. Now the backend service doesn't have anything for any of these languages. So see, everything is returning just the default one, though it is going to the backend service, the foundation service, but it doesn't find anything in the Chinese, which just a few seconds ago we had. So everything is in English now. And so the backend service is unaware of any of these application and these resources, and there is no translation. So I cleared that out so that we go at the end and we manage all that in that application. What we saw earlier, that all these messages in the main form were translated, but this stuff was not translated. So for example, this message box, we haven't done the translation for this one. So now let's go and add the functionality so that this control can also update its translation based on the current selected local ID. So let's go and do that. We have this control implemented here. So let's just go in here. And in this control, we can see that we have this column header, we can translate that. So we can say translations dot, and we can say sample app underscore app control underscore column header underscore name. So we can give a name something like that, and we can make a property, and in the property we can do the same thing. We can have its getter to return what we need in here. So it will go translation base dot get translation for resource, and for resource method base dot get current method dot name, and then default, if it doesn't get anything, just return the name. Okay, so we can do for this one, then we have this column, we can make a property for this one. And then another thing is this form also has 3 buttons, so we need to do the same thing in here. Let me quickly do that. So I have added more properties that we need here. So I have translated the text of these 3 buttons. Then I have translated this message box, that if user want to delete some record and he doesn't do any selection, we need to show a message box. So the default is please select a record from the list, and if we want to translate, we will provide the translation, and even this message box will be translated. And similarly, if we're reporting any error in anywhere, we can even translate that as well. At the moment, it's hard coded, but if we want to translate these error messages, we can make a property for this error message and get that property. So even this error message will be translated into the local language as well. So far in this control, I have translated the column, the list column header, data grid column headers, and the button, these 3 buttons, and the message box. So let's see, everything is yes. So these new properties are integrated with the backend foundation service, which provides the translation. So let's run and see everything works okay. So if I select English, everything's in English. If I select Dutch, no translation is available because no, the system at the back doesn't manages any translation. So I have another application that we can use to see. So this is the backend system which provides a translation for any application, literally. So we have languages that we can add in here that supports, and we have the applications. At the moment, our application, which is the sample app, is not here. Then each application can have the resources that are translated in here. So this is one of the application. It has these resources. These are the resources that we are doing. For example, all the resources. So all these resources, this one. So they will come in here against this app, which will be sample app, and all these resources need to be added here. And then against every resource, we will go to our application sample app and then choose some locale, and then for every resource will provide a translation here. So the first thing is to add an application in this system and then all the resources for this one. Now we have maybe these 20-30 resources, and if we want to add manually, it will be a good amount of task in here. So it will take some time, and there are chances of errors as well. But to make this thing easier, what we can do, the base class in here which we were using to integrate this translations class with the backend, that provides another method. So what we can do, we can write another method. We can say add translations to DB, and in here we can call again the base method translation base dot add translations to DB. And what does it take? It says type of. So we need to provide the type of this class. So what it will do, it knows that I need to add the resources that this translations class manages into database against the app name, and language ID, because this method can be used before the initialization. So we take this stuff from parameter. Okay, now what this method will do, when we invoke this method against this application name and a language ID or locale ID, it will go to this class, which is this class type, and using reflection it will read all the properties that it has, and against every property it will add a resource into this system with a default text as well, so that we don't need to do these things. So an application will be added here, and against that application all the resources that that application need will be added there. And in the translation it will add a dummy translation here, which we can go later and translate that. So let's use this method. We only need to invoke this method for the first time when to add this, and to do that we can go here, and so we can see that our application at the moment doesn't show up in this system. So okay, so it's already running. So let's start again. So we can see here that when this method is invoked, it gets all the properties of that class. So these are all the properties of the translation class, and for every property it will go to the backend and will say, can you please add a translation against this one. So that is very good, makes things easier for us to manage. We don't need to go and add all these resources and applications and translations into the backend systems. Okay, I don't need to invoke this code again, so I can comment it or can even remove it. And now if I go to this system, backend system, so this sample application is here. This is all added by that code that we just ran. And if I go and select this sample app, we can see all the resources with their default text. So that's good. This job is automatically done by the reflection. Now I can go here and can choose this application and can choose any language. So by default there is no translation added. For everything it has added this message. But what we can do, for example, if no, the advantage is we ship our application, we do all this integration. In fact, the whole translation stuff is done. Our application is capable of localizing itself into the selected locale. Everything is done, code is done, code is integrated to the backend service, and backend service has all this information. No, the only thing missing is this translation, which to be honest we are not meant to provide. So we ship our application, say we ship our application to some place in Germany, and somebody who is really using this sample application, he knows what translation should be against this file or anything. So somebody over there who's expert of the software and they know what the file should be translated to German, what this message should be, English message should be translated to German. So they will open, will provide this UI to them as well, and they will open and provide the translation over here. For example, imagine if we want to translate this into German, or what is the first one that we want to translate. So file. So now we go here and we say, okay, this is the translation of the file. We go and save it. Now let's do a couple of more. Let's translate this message into German. So I clean up all the other stuff. So yes, I can translate as many resources I want, and I can then save, and once saved then I can go to my application. Is it running? No. So let's run it, and let's see if we can see some of the messages in German now. So everything here in English, and if I select German, so we can see some of these messages that we translated are showing up in Germany. So I can go and provide more translation. So let me fill up more items. So now I have provided all the German translations for all my resources. I have added nothing against Spanish. I have done all my translations in Chinese for these resources, and Arabic as well. And some of them in Urdu have also been translated. So and now if I go to my application and I choose English, everything becomes English. If I choose German, everything becomes German, but except this control. Okay, so that is something left to do. We forgot to do that. Let's do that. What we need to do for this one, when we are here, we translate all the resources for the main form, but we forgot the application control, and we need to say update yourself as well. So when it will update, it will translate its resources as well. So that was the call that we missed. So now we ask this child control to update its translation as well. So now we see these buttons are also translated, and these column names are also translated. If we choose Chinese, so everything, so menu items, these labels, the button labels, these column headers, this section, these labels, and everything, even this button is translated. And if I choose Arabic, I will see everything in Arabic. Even if I try to delete something, it says you need to select some record. That message is translated as well. And because I didn't do all the translations in Urdu, so we can see the things that have been translated, they show up in the translation. Though those that have no translation, their default one is found. So that's also, we don't need to worry if we have all the translations or not. So what we get, we show. If we don't get anything, we don't worry. We just show the default message for that. Um, so you can see we have done our translations, and this is our backend system that we used to manage all the translations. And in this system we have these applications. This application was added as a new application, and this application have these number of resources, and these resources have their default text as well. So and every resource can have translation in number of locales. So for example, all these resources can have their translation in German, so we can see this here. Spanish, we did not provide any translation. Chinese, yes, we did provide all the translation for all these resources, and we can see that for Urdu we did provide not all but some. So whatever we have in this backend system, this application on the user end uh, reflects according to that. So we can see, okay. Now, the last thing that I wanted to show you is regarding the globalization. I mentioned something in the beginning, um, that when we talk about globalization, the way to implement is that we prefer to use culture independent methods. If we don't, then we have issues, because in different cultures and in different locales, the formation, the equality, and the comparisons, they are dealt differently. And as long as we are not expert, we prefer to go the invariant way, the culture independent methods. And if we are expert, we know how this thing will work and how this culture works, how these methods work, then we can go and use that. One of the example is, for example, imagine I just use that upper method. So I say lowercase I to upper, and then is it equal to uppercase I? Yes. In Arabic it's equal, in English it's equal, in German it's equal, and in Spanish it's equal. And similarly, the other thing is I say lowercase dot to upper invariant, is it equal to I as well? So this one is using the to upper, using the culture specific information, and the second method invariant one is culture irrelevant, so culture insensitive. Everything is same up to here, even Arabic, Urdu, no difference. But no, when I select Turkish, see, in Turkish, if I call to upper method on I, which is the lowercase, and I expect when I say to upper, it should become uppercase I. But no, it doesn't become uppercase I. So it's something else. So in that case, if I don't know how the two upper will behave in that specific culture, I need to go the invariant overload or invariant method for that thing. So if we are not sure how these methods behave in different cultures and different regional settings, then we better use the invariant. Similarly, when we go and do a comparison or do an equal, for example, even in the code I did use the equal method. For example, when I come here and I want to say, okay, which language was selected, so if the name equals the selected name in the combo, I said no, use the equality based on the invariant culture and ignore the case. So that makes me safe. I know this code no will run in any culture, in any language. If I don't use this option, then I'm not sure how it will behave in Turkish or in other locales. So this is, we need to be careful. We need to know all these implementation and use of these methods. Better, if you're not expert, better use those methods which make them irrelevant of the culture, and that is safer. Similarly, it's better to go and read how the encodings and Unicode and UTF-8 and all these encodings works in different cultures. Otherwise, we might end up saving some data which works fine in English, but it might not work in Chinese. Or if it is reading some data which is saved in a different encoding, not standard encoding, and our application try to read it, might crash. So these are the things that we need to be careful. So and they should be done before the application is developed. So we are aware which regions this application will be used, what are the cultures and locations this application will be used, and then we go according to that and develop it. Okay, that's it for today.